Hello and welcome to this session on early Vedic religion. Religion is a worldwide phenomenon that has played a part in all human culture. So it is a much broader and more complex category than the set of beliefs or practices found in any single religious tradition. An adequate understanding of religion must take into account its distinctive qualities and patterns as a form of human experience, as well as the similarities and differences in religions across human cultures. In all cultures, human beings make a practice of interacting with what are taken to be spiritual powers. These powers may be in the form of gods, spirits, ancestors, or any kind of sacred reality with which humans believe themselves to be connected. Sometimes a spiritual power is understood broadly as an all-embracing reality, and sometimes it is approached through its manifestation in special symbols. It may be regarded as external to the self, internal, or both. People interact with such a presence in a sacred manner, and religion is a term most commonly used to designate this complex and diverse realm of human experience. The word religion is derived from the Latin noun religio, which denotes both earnest observance of ritual oblations and an inward spirit of reverence. In modern usage, religion covers a wide spectrum of meanings that reflect the enormous variety of ways the term can be interpreted. At one extreme, many committed believers recognize only their own tradition as a religion, understanding expressions such as worship and prayer to refer exclusively to the practices of their tradition. At the other extreme, religion may be equated with ignorance, fanaticism, or wishful thinking. By defining religion as a sacred engagement with what is taken to be a spiritual reality, it is possible to consider the importance of religion in human life without making claims about what it really is or ought to be. Religion is not an object with a single fixed meaning or even a zone with clear boundaries. It is an aspect of human experience that may intersect, incorporate, or transcend other aspects of life and society. In many traditional cultures, the idea of a sacred cosmic order is the most prominent religious belief. Religion, in this understanding, includes a complex of activities that cannot be reduced to any single aspect of human experience. It is a part of individual life, but also of group dynamics. Religion includes patterns of behavior, but also patterns of language and thought. It's sometimes a highly organized institution that sets itself apart from a culture and is an integral part of a culture. Religious experience may be expressed in visual symbols, dance and performance, elaborate philosophical systems, legendary and imaginative stories, formal ceremonies, meditative techniques, and detailed rules of ethical conduct and law. Each of these elements assumes innumerable cultural forms. In some ways, there are as many forms of religious expression as there are human cultural environments. Religion has existed in all human societies from early times. Although belief systems and traditions of worship differ from culture to culture, they also have many common elements. In all cultures, human beings make a practice of interacting with what are taken to be spiritual powers. These powers may be in the form of gods, spirits, ancestors, or any kind of sacred reality with which humans believe themselves to be connected. Religion satisfies a deep inward craving in man who is not always content with leading mere an animal existence and wants spiritual consolation and peace. India is a home and abode of religions. It occupies a proud first place in religious devotion and godliness. Philosophy and religion has been closely associated with each other in India. The reason is that the final aim of both is the same, that is, to make man realize his supreme goal, which is freedom and from the cycle of birth and death called samsara. The purpose of religion is to refine man and make him attain higher spiritual goals. Philosophical wisdom also aims at self-realization. The Vedic literature, known as the Vedas, are basically religious books which the Hindus have considered as a sacred scripture. The term Veda is derived from the term Vid, which means knowledge. The oldest Veda is a Rig Veda, which is rather the oldest religious book of the world. It contained 1028 hymns and speaks much of the religious ideas and outlooks of the early Aryan people in India. Man's environment and his surroundings induce him to discover the religion. The Vedic religions laid the foundation of the religious practices that are continued till date in modern India. These religions arose from the sacred scriptures that were composed during the Vedic period. These scriptures founded the very base of Hinduism in India. The scriptures that talk of various religious practices are basically the four Vedas, namely Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Samaveda and Atharva Veda. The Upanishads are also considered to be a part of the Vedas and contain valuable information regarding the rituals and religions of Vedic age. The principles of religions in Vedic era were basically laid down by the priests, who were the highest class of people in the society. They were the ones who performed the rituals, chanted hymns and read out holy texts in temples and functions. The texts recorded in the Vedas were supposed to have divine power and were to be chanted perfectly with the right tone, pronunciation and emphasis. This was believed to make the hymns effective to the hilt and gain the maximum power out of it. Religion in early Vedic period revolved around crude forms of worshipping, which basically includes nature worship. This means that people in the early Vedic period worshipped different forms of nature as God, like sun, earth, moon, wind, rain and other natural phenomena. Since there are no scientific explanations for natural phenomena like rain, thunder, wind, etc., people fear them and thus worship them. Chanting of prayers and hymns were a common practice to invoke the gods, and it was normal to sacrifice animals in the name of religion. The later Vedic age saw the increase in powers of the priests, and they formed the highest class in the society. Religious practices were refined and worship of gods in the form of idols gained importance. Animal sacrifice also increased during this period. With rituals and hymns taking center stage, the evolution of Hindu religion took place. Nature worship gave rise to new beliefs and new gods. The Vedic religion revealed a close similarity between the human being and the nature surrounding him. The early Vedic Aryan looked with fear and curiosity to the natural events around him, like the fire, storm, thunder, or even the scorching sun rays. They had no idea how to control them and could never understand why they happen. Naturally, they imposed some divine characters on these natural events and began to call them gods. They worshipped these gods. The religion of Rig Veda was essentially simple, though there were many gods. These gods can be broadly classified into three groups: the terrestrial gods, which includes Prithvi, Soma and Agni; the atmospheric gods, Indra, Vayu, Maruts, Parijanya; the heavenly gods like Varuna, Dhyans, Ashwins, Surya, Savitri, Mitra, Pushan and Vishnu. Varuna is the god of sky, and with him is bound up the conception of Rida, first indicative of the cosmic and then of moral order. The next important god was Indra, the god of thunderstorm, and caused rainfall to relieve the dryness of earth. Next most respectable god was Agni, the god of fire. To satisfy these gods and goddesses, prayers and sacrifices or oblations of milk, ghee, grain, flesh, etc. were offered. In the Rigvedic era, Indra was the principal god, but in the later days he had yielded the place to Prajapati, who was considered as a creator, as a preserver or liberator of the universe. It should also be mentioned that during the later Vedic age, sacrifice and rituals found predominance in religious ideas and practices. In the entire Vedic period, religion and the religious practices gained some special characteristics. The gods of the Rigvedic period were essentially the natural phenomena, but the Aryans tried to personify them, and thus the anthropomorphism began. Secondly, the Rigvedic gods were all equal in status because that was an age of equality in the Aryan society. There was a sense of equality and unity in early Aryan life, arid society, and that sense was reflected in the ideas of gods. Later on, the society underwent changes and the gods were also transformed. The Vedic Aryans also believed that through sacrifices, the gods could be pleased and influenced to work as a devotee wished him to do. This very belief continued even in the later Vedic period, for which sacrifices and oblations were considered as the most powerful and main cause of creation. Practically, oblations, sacrifices, and rituals began to dominate the Vedic religion during the period of our study. The Vedic metaphysics has had a growth and development from the primitive anthropomorphic beliefs to impersonalistic monism. The scholars of Indian philosophy generally recognizes the following stages in the development of Vedic metaphysics and religion. 1. Anthropomorphism. 2. Animatism. 3. Animism. 4. Polytheism. 5. Henotheism. 6. Monotheism. And 7. Monism. Anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism is the attribution of a human form, human characteristics, or human behavior to a non-human thing. The man who first emerges from the mere animal consciousness realizes his dependency towards the power of nature. He began to personify the powers of nature. This adoration gradually intensified, and the powers of nature acquired the form of God. This attribution of nature occurrences to the supernatural causes is known as anthropomorphism. In anthropomorphism, the deities have the same human form, possessions, and motives. They are only glorified human beings. But this personalization is not complete in the sense that they are different from man. They are different from man in as much as they are immortal and have superhuman powers. The early Vedic Indian is also concerned with the fact that there must be some explanation for the observed facts, and this explanation leads to a causal connection that there must be a cause for an effect. This must be the logic behind the definition of natural powers. The most important factor of this belief consists in the conviction that no event can take place without a significant cause. The causal factor has philosophical importance. Animism and animatism. The animistic belief consists in the worship of deities living in natural forces and preceding deities over these activities. The presiding deities are called Adidevas. When the man began to distinguish between spiritual bodies, he superimposed the same in the case of natural forces. Thus, man began to address his prayers to the self on spirit behind the natural forces. In animatism, the worship is done towards the natural forces as animated being. The early man who was unable to draw the distinction between the spirit and body even in him could not draw it in the natural forces. Polytheism. Polytheism refers to the worship or belief in multiple deities, usually assembled into a pantheon of gods and goddesses along with their own religions and rituals. In most religions which accept polytheism, the different gods are representations of forces of nature principles and can be viewed either as autonomous or as aspects or emanations of creator or God or transcendental absolute principle that manifests immanently in nature. It is a type of theism. Within theism, it contrasts with monotheism, the belief in a single God, in most cases transcendent. Polytheists do not always worship all the gods equally, but can be henotheists, specializing in the worship of one particular deity. A central main division in polytheism is between soft polytheism and hard polytheism. Hard polytheism is a belief that gods are distinct, separate, real divine beings, not psychological archetypes or personifications of natural forces. Hard polytheists reject the idea that all gods are one God. Hard polytheists do not necessarily consider the gods of all cultures as being equally real, a theological position formerly known as integrational polytheism. This is contrasted with soft polytheism, which holds that gods may be aspects of only one God, that the pantheons of other cultures are representative of one single pantheon, psychological archetypes or personifications of natural forces. The deities of polytheism are often portrayed as complex personages of greater or lesser status with individual skills, needs, desires, and histories, in many ways similar to humans in their personality traits, but with additional individual powers, abilities, knowledge, or perceptions. Polytheism cannot be cleanly separated from the animist beliefs prevalent in most folk religions. The gods of polytheism are in many cases the highest order of a continuum of supernatural beings or spirit. The term polytheism literally means submissive belief in the plurality of gods. In the polytheistic belief, gods do not necessarily preserve the proper place. In accordance with the adoration, each one of them shines as supreme, or each one of them has significance. According to some scholars, the animism and animatism are forms of polytheism. Henotheism. Henotheism is a belief in single God, each in terms standing out of the highest. Professor Max Muller, who first coined the term henotheism, describes it as a worship of each of the deities and the others being its manifestations. In the Vedic religion, we can see one or other god gaining prominence over the others for a temporary period. The Vedic seers give prominence to a particular deity by praising and representing that as supreme, ignoring the all other deities for the time being. This tendency, according to Muller, is henotheism. When man began to reflect the interrelated whole, he found that the plurality of independent gods leads to chaos. Thus, the man attributed a supreme deity who controls the activities of other gods. It was also thought that the worship of any one god would amount to the worship of supreme deities. Monotheism. Monotheism consists in the submissive belief in one God. In the later development of Vedic religion, the concept of Brahman arises. Brahman, the supreme being, is the ever-growing, ever-expanding, the infinite, dynamic being that has no limits. The man-gods were enthroned and dethroned until the Brahman became the supreme God. According to another concept, Brahman has three aspects: the creator God, the sustainer God, and the destroyer God. Man at first conceived Brahman as having unity personality. Later period of Vedic religion doubt about the personality of Brahman. How are we to conceive his personality? It is neither male nor female. It is not one among many. In fact, everything has its being in the Brahman. Thus, the reflective element of man developed and the monotheism gradually becomes a monistic religion. In monotheism, Varuna at one time and Indra at another time were treated as supreme. Later attempts were made to discover the common powers that works through them all. Monotheism is an evolution of polytheism, but the evolution is by a sort of logical abstraction and not highlighting the imposing characters of one god among the groups and making the imposing god as a supreme god. The Vedic Indians are interested to find out the common power that works behind all gods and selecting the distinguishing features of all gods. These predicates of several gods are personified and regarded as a supreme god. This method is sometimes called philosophic monotheism. Monism. Vedic monism is based on the theme of Brahman and Atman. It consists the belief that the ultimate being is essentially one principle. It is a higher concept of unity of phenomena. Monism traces the whole universe in single souls. The whole possible life, being and not being, death and life, etc. emerge from this soul and also ends in this principle. It is a belief that ultimate reality is one positive and unitary principle. Monistic concept is wholly impersonal. Thus, the highest spiritual truth is expressed in two forms in Vedic hymns: monotheism and monism. Theism here means the belief in a personal deity, whereas absolutism is the view that recognizes an absolute impersonal reality as a ground for all existence. The hymn where absolutism appears in its entire splendor is a well-known Nasadiya Sukta. The ultimate reality here is unlimited, absolute, which cannot be described in human terms. All things are traced to this one principle. Every plurality and the binaries like being and non-being, life and death are shown to be the unfolding of this one. How the one appears as a many is a mystery. Conclusion. The Vedic religion had kindled a quest for knowledge into the mind of the ancient Indians. The Brahmanas, Aranyakas and the Upanishads laid greater importance on oblation and sacrifices. In fact, the study of mathematics began with an attempt to make proper altar for sacrifices and setting the materials for the same in proper places. When the system of animal sacrifice began, it also necessitated a clear concept of physical organs, and hence the study of physiology began. As Vedic civilization advanced, men became more and more curious about the nature, the world, the universe, and of the very life of man himself. His knowledge was limited and he was confused at every stage. This had given rise to several philosophical theories and concepts. The Upanishads began the study of Brahma, and the other philosophical works began to follow it. A systematic and unending chain of knowledge thus began to satisfy the quest of knowledge of our early fathers. Summary. In India, the beginning of philosophy can be traced to Vedic period. Vedas are considered as the authority of Indian philosophy. Vedic knowledge has been preserved through the oral traditions. The four Vedas, Rig, Yajur, Sama and Atharva Vedas, comprise four parts, namely Mantras, Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads. Vedas are the first effort of human mind to understand the nature and solve the mystery of the world. The Vedic thought developed slowly and gradually. Most of the hymns of Rig Veda are prayers offered to God. Various natural forces are considered as gods. These gods were regarded as responsible for the governance of the world. In Vedas, we can see the gradual progress of thought from polytheism to henotheism and from henotheism to monotheism. And finally, the Vedic religion culminates in monism. Now here are some assignments for you. Describe the general features of Vedic religion. How is monism different from polytheism? Explain. Describe Vedic metaphysics. Hope you will go through these reference books for further study. Chandradhar Sharma, A Critical Survey of Indian Philosophy by Motilal Banarsidass Publications, New Delhi. T.M.P. Mahadevan, Invitation to Indian Philosophy by Arnold Heinemann Publications. P.T. Raju, The Philosophical Traditions of India by Motilal Banarsidass Publishers Private Limited. Hope you enjoyed this session. We'll meet again with another topic. Have a nice day.